Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NICHOLASMCGIRR.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's story in the cemetery. Well, happy Halloween, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Stories in the Cemetery. So, it's been a crazy couple of weeks. In case you don't know already, Stories in the Cemetery has been turned into an interactive ghost hunting tour through downtown Charleston. So, you know, if you're any kind of traveler to historical places, that in those type of places you will find normally tours around the city, all kinds of tours. Well, this is something a little different for the city of Charleston, and I've teamed up with Charleston Cavalier Tours to turn Stories in a Cemetery into an interactive ghost hunting tour. So it's super cool. It's been a lot of work working with the webmaster, working with my web design person, and making sure that everything is in line for these tours. Now, the cool thing about these tours is not just, you hear the history and the ghost stories around, some of the buildings and the streets of downtown Charleston. My guests actually get tools, and we're actually on a ghost hunt working together as a team, which it's been an amazing couple of weeks with some of the tours that I've had. We've caught some great evidence through some of the locations that I take you to. And it's been a blast. So I have had a lot of locals come through on this particular tour and have shared their stories as well. So again, those stories are amazing because a lot of times I didn't either know about that urban legend or that story, or it can just kind of add to the ambiance of the entire tour. So guys, it's been a lot of work, and again, my apologies for the delay in the episodes. But again, this is kind of my full-time gig now. So, Stories in a Cemetery is turning into my entire lifestyle, which is awesome. Who doesn't love to hunt ghosts all the time? So, with that being said, tonight, guys, we are talking about the Dock Street Theater. And the Dock Street Theater is in downtown Charleston, and it has been an inspiration for this particular episode. It is one of the most haunted places in America. CBS News, I believe, was the website that I found where it was one of the top 6 most haunted locations in America. And it has got a ton of urban legends and tales wrapped around this one particular location. So the Dock Street Theater was on Dock Street, hence the name. So imagine that, guys. Dock Street Theater was on Dock Street. But now that street is actually Queen Street, and the name Dock Street Theater just stuck. It was just one of those things. It's a great name. On my website, you can actually see some pictures of the place, and of course the gorgeous sign that hangs outside. And it's actually theater with a TRE at the end, not a TER. So this is a place where they actually still hold plays, and the footlight players, like they still work there. It's a beautiful place, guys. But anyway, the urban legends wrapped around this place there's a ton of them. So let's just dive right in. Know that Dock Street Theater did burn down originally in 1740, and what was put in its place was Planters Hotel. A Planters Hotel, of course, during that time frame, it was a bar, it was a hotel. There were some prostitutes there. It was a place of entertainment, and of course where some of the tourists would come through during that particular time. So the tourism here in Charleston dates way back. So the story goes around this particular time frame when the location was a hotel, was that there was a young lady by the name of Nettie Dickerson, and she used to work at St. Philip's Church, which is basically just down the road. It's about 2 blocks down, and it actually has its own stories, which who knows, I may even do an episode just on St. Philip's Church. But Nettie was past the marrying age. So you gotta remember, this was the 1740s, 1750s, and the marrying age was between like 17 to 19, average of being 18. And Nettie was 25. And of course, her being past the marrying age, she wasn't really feeling all that great about herself. So as she was working at the St. Philip's Church and she's seeing all these men come in to the Planters Hotel, she wanted to be part of that. And she went down and she got herself all gussied up, and she put on this red dress, and she went down to the Planters Hotel, and she was able to land herself a job as a prostitute, and she became one of the most desired women of the Planters Hotel. So looking at the outside of the Dock Street Theater, there is a balcony up on the second floor, and that balcony has wrought iron, like a post going across, like a banister going across the front. And Nettie used to stand out there, obviously in between her gentleman callers, and just want more. She wanted to be desired. She wanted to be happy. So she would look down at the church, which is very visible from Dock Street Theater, I would imagine, especially from the second-story balcony, and she would want to go back. And she would go out there all the time. And apparently, the urban legend states that one night while she was out there, that she was talking to the priest of St. Philip's Church, and they were talking about her coming back to work down at the church instead of being a prostitute there at Planters Hotel. So as they're out there talking, and she's contemplating this and wanting to go back, a storm was coming, and lightning struck the wrought iron balcony that she was leaning on and struck her dead. Now, some legends state that the priest wasn't there at all, that she was just out there admiring the stars and wanting more out of life and, things of that nature. But again, this is an urban legend, guys. You just never know what the actual true story was. And just imagine that this is just one story that came out of Dock Street Theater. I'm sure there were other prostitutes that would, go up to that top balcony. I'm sure that there were other things that happened in the Dock Street Theater, other than the three tales that I'm going to tell you. But this particular story rings throughout Charleston all day, every day. So with her in that red dress initially, it is said that Nettie's apparition can be seen on the second story of the Dock Street Theater. Now, the interesting thing about this is it was actually reconstructed back into a theater in the 1930s. Now, about that reconstruction was that they raised the first floor ceiling by 1 foot. So if you think about that for a second, they raised the ceiling, which would shorten the second floor. It is said that Nettie's apparition can be seen from the knees up because she is walking on the original floor of the Planters Hotel, second floor. So, to me, very interesting stuff. I have yet to see this apparition myself. I have visited the Dock Street Theater, but I do like this story only because it shows how far we will take a story or a tale until we find some truth in it. So, with her being seen from the knees up in a red dress, shows that somebody actually did their homework and said, well, this was renovated in the 1930s. She is walking on the original floor. So, again, if you're ever in Dock Street Theater, make sure you go up to the second floor and see whatever apparitions that you can see. So, the other ghost that is said to haunt the Dock Street Theater is that of Junius Booth. Now, the interesting thing here is that Junius Booth, little history lesson, was the father of John Wilkes Booth, who was the assassin for President Lincoln, who was shot in a theater. Now, I kind of chuckle at this only because how we came up with the urban legend that Junius Booth is one of the ghosts that's haunting this place. He didn't even die there. He died somewhere, I think I read, off the coast of Rhode Island. So, again, Junius Booth was one of the actors at the original theater. when it was still Dock Street Theater, the original Dock Street Theater. And he was one of the biggest actors there. He was well known throughout Charleston, and said that to love the theater so much, he haunts it to this day. So again, I find the irony that he was the father of John Wilkes Booth, and the fact that he didn't even die there. I don't know how much validity is there. I'd have to see it or feel it for myself. So I do continue to want to go back to this place with more of my equipment and see how much more of this I can actually find. Now, I have walked through the Dock Street Theater. The cool thing about this is that you can actually walk through on a self-guided tour. So if you're ever in Charleston and you're not going on a ghost walk or anything like that, you can actually take a daytime self-guided tour throughout the theater. That's through the lobbies and the tap room and all of those things, and you can walk around. I walked around with my EMF detector. I did have a few spikes, I will say that. I had some spikes while I walked through, but wasn't able to recreate anything. I don't know how that validates any of the actual spirits that are there. But at the same token, I didn't have any weird or odd feelings while I was there. I did walk throughout the entire theater. I walked right up to the stage. I did not go on to the stage, but I did walk throughout the entire grounds, which is absolutely gorgeous. So even if you don't stop to catch a show, make sure you do get to tour this place. Really easy to find. Actually, it was, believe it or not, when I moved to Charleston, it was one of the first places I wanted to see because it is one of the most haunted locations. So, again, guys, we're going to take a quick break for one of our sponsors.
Good evening, everybody, or morning or afternoon or whatever, it doesn't matter. We are Graveyard Tales. Now, if you like ghost stories, hauntings, cryptid encounters, and the weird history behind them, then you should join us in the graveyard.
You can find us on any of your favorite podcast providers. Check out our website at graveyardpodcast.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at GRV. Just go search Graveyard Tales.
That would be easier. Now, we hope to see you in the graveyard.
Alright guys, if you haven't listened to Graveyard Tales yet, you really need to. Those guys do a great job. Adam and Matt talk about anywhere from ghost huntings to UFOs to different phenomenon all over the board. They're a huge inspiration for this show, Stories in a Cemetery. So guys, make sure you check them out. It's a great show. Back to Dock Street Theater. This is, we've already talked about, Nettie Dickerson. We've already talked about Junie and Booth. There's two more pieces of this that I want to piece together for you. And with that said, this is where, you kind of have to look at a map a little bit. So also right down the street, on the same side of the street as Dock Street Theater, but across the street from St. Philip's Church is what is known as the Pirate House. And yes, you guessed it. That's exactly where pirates used to come and stay, have a few drinks, catch a good night's sleep on a bed, because I'm sure on a pirate ship there weren't many beds. I'm assuming. You could tell me any different. And that's where they used to stay. It's literally one block down. And what is said about this particular connection is that Blackbeard, you can't come to Charleston without any kind of story of Blackbeard. It's all over the place. You can't go anywhere without hearing about pirates or Blackbeard himself. Now, some of the urban legends, they state that Blackbeard never even set foot on Charleston soil, that he would stay on his ship. Who's to say what any of this is true? Again, guys, these are all urban legends, and I haven't investigated the pirate house. I haven't been inside the pirate house. I've simply been on the street. That's it. That's as far as I've gotten. Who knows? Maybe one day, one Stories in a Cemetery is a little bit bigger. I will actually have access to the pirate house and be able to investigate this further. The urban legend goes that when the pirates were staying at the pirate house, there was an underground tunnel that went underneath the pirate house over to the Dock Street Theater. Very interesting indeed. It is also said, and can be proven that this tunnel was filled in during some renovations. I want to say it was in the 1970s or the 1980s. Now, the urban legend states that Blackbeard's treasure is buried, well, even further buried because it's been filled in that tunnel that leads from Dock Street Theater over to the Pirate House. Now, the reason they would actually use that particular tunnel was to basically go catch a show. They would sneak into the Dock Street Theater and, go catch a show, be entertained while they were here in town of Charleston. Now, a very interesting point indeed is that nowhere in any of my research does it say that Blackbeard's treasure could be buried underneath the Dock Street Theater to the Pirate House. Nowhere does it say that. In fact, on mentalfloss.com, there is a small list of places where Blackbeard's treasure could be buried. One of them, the list basically says off the coast of North Carolina, in the blast pattern off the coast of Ocracoke Island, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, so if I am, somebody please stop me or correct me. Plum Point, Teach's Kettle, Archbell Point, anywhere in the Caribbean, could we be any more vague, or in hell. Nowhere in here does it state that Blackbeard's treasure is actually buried in Charleston anywhere. Now, who knows? It could just be an urban legend, could be a tall tale. How you want to look at it, it does add to the ambiance of the entire block of all these haunted locations of Dock Street Theater, the Pirate House, St. Philip's Church. The Powder Magazine is right around the corner. Like, that whole area has ghost stories and hauntings wrapped all around it. Imagine that, and I'm going to pretend here for a moment that the list that I just read off to you, where Blackbeard's treasure could be, is a big hoax that he actually did bury it here in Charleston. What would that treasure actually look like? I'd be very curious to see what was actually in that treasure. If it was a big joke, if it was a laughingstock, if it was a hoax from Blackbeard himself. And keep in mind, Blackbeard didn't reign very long. The fact that we've pinpointed that he even set foot on our soil, now granted his ship was here, that he actually set foot and somebody actually seen him, I think that would have been documented somewhere, even, during that particular time period. Just another urban legend that wraps around the Dock Street Theater that makes it a very, very interesting location to even see from the street, let alone be inside. One last piece of the Dock Street Theater that could make it haunted, and this is just some extra research that I found. There was a mansion called the King Radcliffe Mansion that was somewhat destroyed, and the pieces were kind of taken all over the place, and then the rest of the building was knocked down. Part of that particular mansion was put into the Dock Street Theater. Now, this is not listed on my blog because I just found this yesterday. The King Radcliffe Mansion is basically what makes up Radcliffe Borough neighborhood in downtown Charleston. This is something I'm actually going to look further into, only because it brings a lot of memories back from another investigation I did called the Brentwood. And the reason I bring up the Brentwood restaurant, that's in Little River, South Carolina. Go back a few episodes and find the Brentwood restaurant and listen to that. But when I was with Psychic, he was able to pinpoint which parts of the house or which pieces of furniture were not part of the Brentwood restaurant. It was super interesting to me because he was spot on. He said that different pieces of wood or different pieces of furniture actually hold on to different types of spirits, activity, or paranormal activity. With that EMF detection that I had and with some of those spikes, I'm wondering if some of that actually came from the pieces that were from the King Radcliffe Mansion. I did find a few articles that actually pinpoint which parts of the theater these pieces were taken to and which mantles they are, and I plan on going back. So there may be an updated episode or updated blog, so make sure you follow the blog on nicholasmcgurr.com. Just look for Stories in a Cemetery, and I may have some updates with some new evidence I can't make this trip back into the theater for another week or two, but at the same token, I did get some EMF spikes around the theater itself. And with that said, I'm just wondering, is it actually coming from some of the things we've already talked about? Or is it coming from a whole different story altogether? If this story does take another few steps and I need to investigate the Radcliffe Borough neighborhood a bit more and learn more about this mansion, it might be a whole separate episode and I might just tie the two together. Again, guys, great urban legends here. Although I only had a few EMF spikes, it's still pretty eerie in there, especially if you're in there alone. And again, with these self-guided tours, you can do that. You can actually walk around by yourself. Nobody's going to question you. You could take pictures. I took some gorgeous shots. They are listed on my blog. Make sure you check that out. And of course, what I am going to ask is that if you're ever in the Charleston area, make sure you look up Stories in a Cemetery, and you will find our tours on charlestoncavaliertours.com. We will actually go ghost hunting ourselves, and if I come up with new evidence, who knows, maybe I'll save that information for the tours alone. But again, guys, I can't thank you enough for listening and sharing these episodes. It's only helping to grow Stories in a Cemetery to be a bigger thing and to help me out with my investigations. I will get better at posting weekly, but right now it looks like with the upcoming week, I do have some visitors coming to town who are going to need some tours. So I will be going dark next week for sure, and I would definitely keep you posted on where I will be next. You can expect places like the Pickney House. I'm actually investigating a cafe that's downtown, and that's coming up very, very soon, so hopefully I will have enough evidence to bring up through our blog and podcast here. And again, thank you for listening, and I will see you guys later on, or maybe even on a tour. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in a Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.